You're free.
Look at that, we have robots here.
Welcome to the Right Now Show, presented by the Laguna Woods Writers Club.
Welcome to the Right Now Show. I'm Judy Saxon.
And I'm Charlie Redner, and this is the show where we put the emphasis on writers, writing, and the arts.
Well, Charlie, I'm so excited. I have something new in my life.
Me too.
Which,
But at least it's maybe 4 years old. I was introduced to haiku about 4 years ago, and it came by way of Gary Lawless, one of the beat writers who knew Gary Snyder, who also was involved with Allen Ginsberg. And I met a guy through his books and his work, Nanao Sakaki. He was a Japanese soldier during World War II, and he was on Okinawa, and he actually saw the mushroom cloud from Nagasaki.
Oh my.
And what he did after that was walk the earth preaching peace, love, and he was very much anti the atom and doing nuclear for power.
Yes.
And in 1980, he took Ginsberg back to Japan with him, and they visited some of these sites, and they were warning everyone, be careful, this is not a good thing. And I just wanted to read, then I was introduced through them to haiku, and this is what I wrote about that. A prayer for Japan. Mother Nature burps, earth slides ever so slightly, mankind bows. Ooh. And then I added, Nanao observes atomic mushroom, hears man-made thunder, walks the earth, planting love.
Oh.
So that's my introduction to haiku and the love and spirit that I feel with people who write poetry and haiku.
Yes, it comes through.
Thank you.
Well, my big new thing is haiku, thanks to our guest today, and it's really fascinating. I delved more into it, and I looked up the traditional form, where it's exactly 17 syllables, 5 syllables, the first line, then 7 and 5. And I've just been really having a good time, but it's tricky because I thought I had it finished perfect, and I read it to my neighbor, and she was complimentary, and then there was a pause, and she said, you have one too many syllables in your last line. So back to the drawing board. But it's really fun. So let me tell you about our guest today, Scott Galesso. He's an author of 14 books of poetry. His work has appeared in over 200 journals, magazines, including Europe, Japan, Singapore, Canada, USA, and he has 2 more books will be published in the fall. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you
Hey,
very
Scott,
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
My
Glad to
spoken
be here.
word guest, neighbor, and reader.
Yes, a member of the publishing club too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, what you used to do, where you're from.
Okay, well, I was born in New York, and I lived there first 27 years. I've had a variety of jobs, everything from a technical writer to a sales person, work construction. I was in security up in Seattle. We're working for all 3 sports teams at once.
Really?
So that was interesting. So I've had a varied professional career.
Yeah.
But I've been writing since 8th grade. So.
How'd that happen?
I had a homework assignment, and I was working on it on a Sunday, and I had spent all Saturday at the beach, and I couldn't get the beach out of my mind. So I started writing a poem about the sea, and because I grew up on Long Island, so I always loved the sea. And ever since then I've been writing. So I've been writing for over 50 years now. And mostly poetry.
So you wrote a poem that day rather than your homework assignment?
I got the homework assignment done, but barely.
Well, so how did the interest in haiku develop?
Okay, well, I had moved up, after my wife and I got married in '89, we moved up to Seattle in 1990, and I was looking for a writer's group. And there was an advertisement in the local paper that they were going to have a meeting, and I didn't know anything about haiku, but I wanted to learn. So I went to the meeting, and I've been writing haiku ever since.
Oh.
So about
You got
30
hooked.
years now.
You got hooked right
Yeah.
away then.
I did. I got hooked right away. I had a very good teacher,
Oh, who's
and
that?
Francine Porad. She started the Haiku Northwest group,
Okay.
and she was also the Haiku Society of America president.
Oh my.
And she was both a writer and a painter as well.
Oh, uh-huh.
So she was a great influence, and we had a very dynamic group of people up there. And so that's how I got into it, and
Yeah.
I've been writing ever since.
Did you study with her and learn from her, or did
Yes,
you
I
just
did.
kind of find your own way?
I did. I studied with her. I learned with her. We workshopped together, and I read and read and read and read, which is what any
Good
good
for you, yeah.
poet should do,
Right.
Yeah,
or writer for that matter.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So.
And you performed when you said read and read. You mean performing in front of others?
I mean both literally reading book after book after book, and also performing
Yes.
as well.
Right, right.
So it's a combination of both
Yeah.
of them.
In your
Yeah.
poetry readings, was it just a group of haiku people, or did you have poets?
In the
Did you
haiku
have
groups,
essays,
in the
or-
haiku groups, yes, but we also discussed essays and issues that would come up about where haiku was at for our culture.
Okay.
You know, coming out of the Japanese culture, how were we to interpret that through English? And a lot of it was keeping the spirit of the traditional Japanese, but presenting it through the eyes of our own culture, because we're different people.
Right,
We come from
right.
different places.
So you talked about the agrarian society, and then you talked about
Right.
modern times, and also the 757 or 575. Rather.
Right. So
575.
traditional Japanese haiku came out of Hoku before that. And basically, it was because they grew up in an agricultural society, and it started way back in the 1200s. That was what they wrote about. And so nature was always, and is still, a very important part of haiku. But we live in a different culture and a different time, so some of our haiku may be about things we see in the city, for instance.
I see, okay.
Okay, it's how we relate to the world around us. And so in haiku, the description that's frequently given now is a poetry that could be said in one breath, which plays to the brevity issue in the Japanese culture. Mm-hmm. And also a moment keenly perceived in time. And it is primarily about nature, but not exclusively.
Judy, do you want to hear some samples from Scott?
Yes.
Do you want to read a few?
I
Do
would.
you have a couple that you can?
Okay, so some of these are haiku and some are senryu. And senryu came out of haiku, but it's about human foibles. So you'll see a mix of nature-based poetry here and some that are more about people.
Okay.
Hurricane season. Wind and rain lash our denial. Harvest moon. Our next door neighbor gone. Chilly night. Slipping into our kitchen. Praying mantis. Full mailbox. Empty nest. Migrations. Firestorm. Stolen memories. Swollen eyes.
Oh.
Arm in arm. Two guys push a pram. Bulldog in her pink vest. Winter solstice. Stone circle at sunrise. Goosebumps. Ashes. Only his dog tags spared.
Oh my.
Halloween. Not every witch in costume. Saddleback's Peak. Sugared by snow. Frost on red apples. Bitter wind. The town fountain's lost voice.
Now you wait for your applause, right? I mean, it's one of those things
Yes.
that when you read,
Because they're short pieces. so-
right,
Oh, I'm so impressed, and you invoke
those images.
one word of the mailbox and
Yeah.
then migration.
Yeah.
Says it all, one word.
Well, that's part of what the tradition of haiku is that you're not just seeing something, you're almost becoming the object of what it is you see. It becomes part of you. And that's a lot of what haiku is about. And it's a short form, but to do it right, it takes a lot of work.
Oh, it must.
It's a little deceptive in that way.
Oh. So some of those are, how many words would you say? Like, for instance, the mailbox. I mean,
It can be, actually, there's a little bit of controversy in this because one of the famous haiku was written on a page and it was just one word, and it was tundra. The object being that word evoked a wide expanse of emptiness, just in one word.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
But frequently, I would say it's more or less 3 lines, although there is also monoku, which can be written in 1 line, which is a haiku in 1 line.
Okay.
But it can basically be from 1 to 4 lines. What you're trying to do, as I said, is speak the poetry in 1 breath.
Yes.
Right.
So as long as it kind of fits in that parameter,
right.
that works.
So if you're reading it, it doesn't matter. But if you're
right.
printing it in a book, then
Exactly.
those number of lines mean something and are important to
Right.
designate.
That's true, yeah. And as far as the syllable count, originally, when the early translators were translating from Japanese
Yes.
to English, the Japanese use what's called anji. That's their version of syllable. So
Right.
13 anji was most closely related to 17 syllables in English.
That's how they
Which
came.
is where that came about.
Right.
But now, because we live in a different culture, a different time, because our seasons are different, and this is now a worldwide form, then it doesn't apply in the same way. So the object
Okay.
is to keep the spirit of it alive,
Okay.
and to have that focus on nature and the keen moment, more than what the syllable count is.
Now in
Okay.
the green room, we were talking about writing to be read and writing to read.
Right.
Do you pay emphasis to certain poems that you want to perform as opposed to just putting them in your book and having it published?
When I'm performing, yes, because you have to, and actually to some extent when I'm writing too, in how I put the book together or how I put the poem together, or if I'm doing a
order of
program
them,
where I'm
yeah.
reading in public, how to balance maybe serious subjects with lighter subjects. You don't want to go, for instance, and do a performance where every single poem you do is a downer. People are
Right.
going to walk out and like,
Yes,
oh, I'm so
yeah.
glad I went to this, and they're miserable. You have to balance the serious with the lighter element. And I
Right.
think it's important to understand that and to know something about your audience, meaning if you're reading for younger people, some subject matter might not be appropriate.
Yes.
So you have to know your audience. I think that's very important.
That can be said about older people too.
Right, and that's true too.
Yes.
But I
They have
think
a
it's
different
important
culture.
to know the audience that you're going to read for, and again, balance the subject matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're in a poetry group, say, that is doing a particular theme, like let's say they're doing something about the ecology and nature.
Right.
Okay, well then it's appropriate because it's a themed reading to stick to that.
Right.
But in most readings, especially if you're reading a variety out of your own book, you're going to have different subject matter.
Yes.
And so you want to balance that. You don't want to have everything short, and you don't want to have everything 4 or 5 pages long where people start getting lost.
Right.
So you have to balance that.
So when you write a poem, not just your haiku, but say a regular length poem, whatever that
Right.
is, 7, 10, 15 lines or whatever, you're very concerned about how it sounds and the syllables and how your
Yes.
poetry is perceived as
Yes,
performed.
I think it's very important for it to have a certain musicality. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is we hear when something doesn't sound right. In other words, if you have a word that doesn't belong with the rest of the poem, everybody's going to know that. they're going to say,
You
I like the
forced that
poem, but there was something
rhyme.
right in the middle that threw me off. So the sound is also a cue to you that maybe there's a better word you could use. So when I write a poem, before I actually put it, in a book form, I'll read it out loud and say, does this work?
Yes.
And then I can tell if it works or not. And that's a very good guide. So I
Right.
think it is
Exactly.
important to know the sound as well as the visual the imagery that you're
Yes,
trying to
yes.
use.
So, writing from haiku to what I call poetry per se, are you concerned then about not only how it sounds, but how it's going to be perceived? I mean, the emphasis on certain words, certain lines are more important than others?
Yes, because part of it is that it's not just you writing the poem. It's also what the person who is listening brings to the poem. So it's I look at it as a collaboration between the performer and the audience, if you will. If you don't have feedback, it's like any performer. If you're on stage, if you get no response, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
So it's important to have that, but the listener brings what they hear as well as what you write. And again, it's a collaboration.
Do you, when you finish, for instance, a haiku, do you bounce it off somebody else? Is there somebody else you read it to before you read it in front of a group, or do you just launch it unread by others?
I've been doing it for a long time now,
Right.
so some of those, when I read, I know I've hit the mark. Sometimes I'm not sure, and the feedback is very important. So I think it's good to have some critiquing or some workshopping, because we all have our blind spots too. And
Yes.
something that you've worked on for a long time, you might not see that in this particular case, you're missing something.
Right.
Something is vague that should be more clear, or something is too much of a knock on the head rather than
Yeah.
a suggestion,
Yes.
which you want. Sometimes you want to suggest something and let, as I said, the person who's listening bring what they have to the table
Yes,
as well.
right.
I think that's important.
I
So.
had a kind of a workshop. We did it was a blog, Luis Alberto Urrea, he called it Cabin 21, and we all went on and we it wouldn't have to be poetry, but it could be. And we get a little feedback, we ask for it, and I'll tell you, just moving one word from beginning of a sentence to the middle made a world of difference in something I wrote once. I'll never forget it. So those little critiques can really help sometimes.
Yes, and one person who's particularly known for that, who's somebody who's probably known for a lot of people better as a musician, who is Leonard Cohen.
Oh,
He wrote many books of poetry and fabulous stuff. And he was
His lyrics are
the
beyond.
word, he would work on some poems for 10 years before he actually published them, because every word had its place and he wanted it to be as fine as he could make it.
wow.
So
Some people argue that lyrics aren't poetry, but get out of here.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
Now, do you believe
Bob Dylan put that to rest, I
Did
would
he?
say.
Yeah. How about rhyme? Do you feel, you work in haiku, you don't hear rhyme, or you can, but when you're writing a regular poem, if I say.
I think, well, I write mostly in free form, but I've also written song lyrics, and obviously in a song, rhyme is good. And it's also, in a way, how poetry started. And the reason for that was when they didn't have written language, you would memorize. So let's say, like in Africa, the griots, the easiest way to remember something is to rhyme it. So they would sing it. And the same is true in Celtic culture, like Irish culture.
The Berbers in the Atlas Mountains.
Right.
The women would sing at night to keep the clan informed in what was going on in their history, and it's amazing. I learned that from
And a lot of the Greek epics, they did the same thing too.
Yes.
That they would, because they were talking about a long history,
Right.
in order to be able to tell the whole story, they would have some kind of rhyme pattern as well. It's actually very common.
Now, do they have contests with haiku throughout the country, or?
No, actually they have them throughout the world. It is now
Oh, okay.
from the Japanese root, It was discovered in English and also discovered in Spanish. And of course, because those are also universal languages now, it's spread across the world. I just went to a conference recently. We had people from Guam, from the Bahamas, from Japan, from Australia, all over the United States, Switzerland. So it truly is now been developed as a world form.
This was your recent trip to Santa Fe?
To Santa Fe, yeah.
Right.
And it was wonderful.
And you read in front of, was it a big audience?
A couple hundred people, 200 people or so, yeah.
Wow.
And it was extremely gratifying because, as you know, writing is a solitary activity.
Yes.
So sometimes it's nice to know how people respond to what you do.
Right.
And obviously, if you read to an audience, you're going to know good or bad,
Yeah.
you know, how that
Yes.
worked out. So.
You had a longer piece you wanted to read
Yeah, I
today?
have one piece here.
We'll see if we have time to get it in. We might as well do it now.
Okay.
Judy. What do you think?
Yeah, this is
Right.
called the Aleph, and I'll explain what that is here. Okay, there's a short epigram by Jose Luis Borges, and I'll read that and then the poem. Aleph. The Aleph was about 2 or 3 centimeters in diameter, but all of cosmic space was there, with no diminution in size. Each thing was infinite, because I could clearly see it from every point in the universe. And here's the poem. The dead star's light still illuminates night. The moment that was, is, and will be connected. Time bats an eye. The first kiss, warm on the lips, meets the last breath, escaping the body. Past lives, future visions collapse in the moment. I stand by the sea as the tides change. As I stand on the mountain, snow at my feet. As I stand before a stele in Rome, or feel the dew of Aaron's grass wet between my toes. My mother's blood flows through my body. My father's lungs pump air in and out. I am a babe in arms, a child on the verge of language, a man strong in his prime, a weathered elder. At what instant does one become another? We are dancers in a cosmic circle, attuned to spherical music, and those we loved remain with us, the space dust of cells in a soul.
Right, yeah.
And you're reading from what? Lemmick, what is that?
This is Lummox, which is an anthology
Uh-huh.
that just came out this past year, and I'll be reading selection from that tomorrow at Beyond Baroque in
Okay.
Venice.
Oh, yes.
Which is a well-known
Right, yes,
site
it
for that.
is.
Judy,
Yes,
you've been
I
there.
read there. I
You
read there.
did.
Yeah, in a group.
Here I am
open
with
mic.
celebrities here. Huh?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
it sure is. Wow. What do you think the attraction of haiku is? Because I'm thinking a lot of our viewers should try it. I mean, I'm just hooked on it. I think it's fun.
I think, well, part of it is I think it is fun too. And it's something that you can do. One thing I do is I carry around a little pocket notebook because I never know when something
Yes.
is going to catch my eye that I want to write about.
Yes.
And I just stick that, my notebook with my little pen there. And I think the fact that you can go anywhere and be anywhere and see whatever it is you see and just be able to write it down, I think that's one attraction. And then, as we said, it's a moment keenly perceived. So you're not just walking through things, you're truly aware of that object of your attention. And I think because that can have to take place anywhere, I think that's one of the attractions too, that you can just do that.
Yes, yes.
In Japanese, they have what they call a ginkgo. You walk around, basically, and then you sit down and you write about something you saw that moved you in some fashion.
I love that.
And it would be like doing a walkabout in Australia, or
Right.
just taking a hike in the woods, like Gary Snyder might do,
Right.
and then writing about what you see.
See, I haven't achieved that yet when my haiku writing. I understand what you're saying, but I haven't done that.
Takes a lot. It
I
takes
sit down and
practice.
write, but I haven't been the tree. I haven't, experienced the nature that you're trying to put into your work.
And the idea of carrying it in your pocket, because I got so engrossed in writing haiku, and then I was out somewhere and I think of a perfect line, And then, if I didn't write it right down, you do
gone.
forget. Yeah.
Poof.
Yeah. So you learn to.
Yeah, that's why I also keep one by my bedside, because just when I'm going to sleep, sometimes something will go, and I'm always afraid of forgetting it. So it's like, I better write it down now,
Yeah.
and I do.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just it's part of being an artist. You don't want to lose the train of thought or the feeling that you're going through, because you don't know if you'll experience it
Again.
in quite the same way again.
Right.
You probably won't. I mean,
Yeah.
most
Because it is a
experiences-
moment.
Right, aren't
Yeah.
duplicated.
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
And that moment comes and goes, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Makes you more aware too, doesn't it? Just
Yes. Yes.
living
And
living in the
and
now.
I think we
and-
should all be aware of the life we're living,
Yes.
and the world we live in, and how to take care of it.
Right.
Because that's the other part.
Amen. I
We're
know.
part of it, not apart from it.
That's
And I think that's important.
And that's what Gary
And that's
Snyder's
part of our job as writers, is to
Yeah.
recognize that and write about the things we care about.
Well said. Yes. Yes.
Gary Snyder's still up in the mountains. They're doing that very
Yes.
same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's life.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Yep.
it is. Wow. Well, Charlie,
Yes.
are you inspired to continue writing?
I'm more
haiku?
inspired today talking to Scott,
Yeah.
and I'm going to actually be able to put into practice what I've learned today. And I've learned a lot, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you
It
Well,
really,
so
thank you for having
much.
me.
This is so
Yes.
educational
I
to
appreciate
me,
it.
who obviously likes to want to write poetry. So.
Thank you both very
thank
much for
you.
having me.
Thank you.
So I was going to close with a haiku that I wrote, and you can close with a saying if you want. I think this is the favorite one I've written, but I haven't been that rabbit yet, but I'll try to appreciate it better. Crickets call lovers, lean coyote listens hard, rabbit statuesque.
Oh, I can just picture that.
I know, I think, okay, but I got to become the rabbit.
Very good.
What do you have for us, Judy?
Well, this is written by Aberjohnny, and it's a haiku. Dare to love yourself as if you were a rainbow with gold at both ends.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very, I see that.
Yeah.
Gold at both ends says so much.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Anyhow. Well, Scott, thank you for coming.
Thank you
It was
very much.
educational,
Thank you.
Thank you
enjoyable,
for having me.
and I'm really glad that you were able to make it
I was
this morning.
pleased to be able to do this with you.
Okay.
Thank you. And don't forget the Writers Club on Friday, 3 in the afternoon at Clubhouse 3, the Performing Arts. And everybody go home and try a haiku. You'll find it
There
fun,
you go.
challenging, good for the brain.
Yes. Thank
Definitely.
you.
I'm Judy Saxon.
And I'm Charlie Redner. Take care.
Thanks for watching.